We have a very strong consideration of diversity, equality, and inclusion in our everyday work, and in every decision and every facet of how we work here at KTH. We continuously engage with our stakeholders and partners, which is both industry and government. We have a lot of continuous learning programs in different disciplines and different domains. For instance, we are kicking off a continuous learning program in cybersecurity here in the next couple of months. Our learning curricula that we provide to bachelor's and master's and PhD students is, again, being continuously improved with innovative learning and teaching methods. We have very strong engagement with the business and the government world. And the last and by no means the least, probably the most important, every single or nearly a majority of our research projects is highly interdisciplinary and cuts across multiple disciplines. So all of this would sort of percolate through the ecosystem, starting from our students, from our research, and from our engagement with the outside world, so to speak. We, as a university, we of course can't work in a vacuum. We need feedback not just from other scientists, but also from the outside world, right? Outside our ivory tower, so to speak. That's where we know where the problems are, and that's how we know what to work on. So without actually us going out there, we can't take the next step. So one of KTH's sort of strategic aims is that our research should be made visible to the greatest extent possible. And that means both to the international scientific community, of course, that's why we publish, but also to society in general. So, of course, being a university, we publish mostly in scientific outlets, such as open access journals. That's one very dominant way. But a lot of researchers at the university also actively engage in public debates through podcasts, blogs, newspaper articles, and so on. Being a public university in Sweden means that all of our lectures and like thesis defenses are open to the public as well. We don't often see participation in those, but they are open to the public. Again, like I mentioned previously, all of our research projects are in engagement with actors in civil society, with government, with industry, and so on. But they're also, to pick out a few concrete examples, we have a center here, Center for Data-Driven Health, and that includes actors from hospitals, from pharmaceutical companies, from the government, and so on. That's just one example. Our engagement with the public, we are located in the Flemingsberg campus of KTH, which is in the southern part of Stockholm. And every autumn, we have a couple of open days where we showcase our research to the public. It's just an exhibition in a park. So we have our demos, we have our posters, we display stuff like that. Our group in particular makes all of our research open access, as in we just publish it on the web. So we build interactive visualizations, games, interactive models. We publish our code and so on. And all of that is open to everybody. So I think we covered like the communication bit and our interaction with society and industry and so on. And that's like a major way, just by working in partnership with different kinds of actors, right? The other sort of facet that's often ignored is through our students who work again in the research projects and are exposed to the latest methods and latest technologies, and they go out and find jobs, and that's another way of uptaking research innovation. But more concretely, there are again sort of innovation pipelines, both at the university, both at the central university level and outside the university ecosystem. So for instance, KTH has an innovation center, or they have an innovation unit which aids in sort of creating companies from ideas of researchers and students. Um, uh, in connection to the open science and so on, our group, or rather Sebastian, who's the group supervisor, also has a project on data innovation. So in connection with the European health data space, uh, he runs a project that is trying to create innovation pipeline specific to health data. So if you have a data-driven or an AI company, then what are the pathways through which you can bring your innovation to market? So it's essentially creating structures for researchers so they don't have to do all the legwork themselves, but just putting in place existing structures, existing frameworks, so they can more seamlessly go through this process and end up with an actual commercial product. I mean, we are a technical university, so our focus is mostly on engineering and technical disciplines. But within that space, we perform both basic and applied research. So if you would kind of look at the TRL levels, which is as good a framework as any, KTH focuses on TRLs from 1 to 5, for instance. That's where I would say the bulk of our research is. So what that would mean is we work a lot on very foundational aspects, but we also have a lot of research projects that directly take those ideas and research directly to where it should be deployed and applied. So at the Center for Data-Driven Health, for instance, we are working on sort of creating technologies for integrating health data, which would then be the substrate on which a lot of other research becomes possible, right? So for instance, if you look at FEMaLe, a large part of the FEMaLe project is on working with diverse kinds of data, but there is no foundational mechanism for putting it all together. Not in the project, but certainly not anywhere else. So if you can create those foundational sort of aspects, then applying and deploying further research becomes much more easier, right? So on this substrate of integrated health data, you can build a number of applications like stratification by risk or diagnostic decision support and so on. And then further along that line, from a very core technological aspect to taking it to the clinic, we also work a lot with schools and with government on sort of other aspects. For instance, how do you then use these tools to improve societal well-being? Or how do you then take the lessons learned from these tools and put that into policies or programming and so on? So it's this entire spectrum that we cover. And there are, DEI aspects, which is, again, not the same as gender equality, but those considerations are core to every aspect of KTH's work. And it's core in every aspect of our group's work as well. There is a strong sort of consensus here that, of course, gender is intersectional and there cannot be any sustainability or climate adaptation without gender justice or other forms of justice. It could be racial, it could be something else. And often I find that there is a very utilitarian sort of aspect to this, okay, that gender makes your organization or decision making better. At KTH, it is a bit more value-based. So this aspect is based on norms of justice and human rights and democracy, and it's embedded through the organizational structure. But most importantly, it is emphasized and is a core part of the research we undertake. So you cannot improve gender equality by only looking at line management or how do you bring more women or other in. You have to also consider that in the research you undertake. So yeah. I'll narrow down the scope a little bit. So we are the Department of Biomedical Engineering and Health Systems, specifically. And we have, through FEMaLe, we have an excellent opportunity to bring some of our expertise to bear on making a large improvement in people's lives. That's sort of the utopic answer. More selfishly, we get partnerships with excellent world-class partners, and we get to work on interesting scientific problems. So very abstract, but also very straightforward reasons for why we are in this project. Yeah, so we are mostly involved in work package 5, which is the project structure. But more concretely, we support the Swedish study on patient-reported data through the Lucy app. We also support in analyzing that data, not just from Sweden, but from all other countries. And through the Center for Data-Driven Health, this is not strictly in the scope of the project, but we are trying to work with all the work packages in trying to provide like a unified database perspective or like a definition or language to express endometriosis. So what I mean by that is the project works with different kinds of data, all of which have different meaning and are expressed in different technologies through different syntax and semantics. But of course, the project cuts across all of these sort of different data sets and different meanings, but there isn't a foundational or there isn't a common language to express the meaning of this data in. And through the Center for Data-Driven Health, we are trying to develop that, hoping it will add benefit, or hoping it will, in the hope that developing further analysis or further decision support tools will become easier through this one single expression. Collaboration with world-class partners, access to data sets, at least, through which we can build further research. And again, the potential for applying our research to make a substantive, real impact on people's lives. But again, I mean, these are, I would say that these are pretty much fairly common to most researchers in the project, I would say. Yeah, so I don't feel particularly qualified to answer this one. um, being trained as an engineer and getting to know endometriosis only recently through the project, I'm ashamed to say. But listening to having been in the project, one big pain point would seem to be a lack of awareness in general, which again stems from gender inequality and all of that. But I would say, putting my scientist hat on, I would also say that sort of the variance and sort of the variability in how endometriosis occurs would also be a huge challenge, because it would, again, if you look at the diversity of data and systems, you could probably find endometriosis in a lot of different places. And you need some way to bring all of that research together, right? To make sense, to make meaning out of all of that, and then to actually produce research that can make changes or improvements. So yeah, I would say as a layperson, I would say a lack of awareness. From a scientific point of view, I would say sort of the diversity and the variance in how and where endometriosis is encountered and expressed in clinical settings. So the gender question is kind of important here, that through the project, you can also make a substantive change in the conversation around how women, or those who suffer with endometriosis, how their conditions is being treated, and make a change in either attitude or programming or process in the healthcare sector. But you can't do that unless you have evidence for it. So I just add that to that question. Yeah, again, I don't feel very qualified to answer this one, but and I'll just change the answer a little bit to not necessarily, this is not specific to women's health, but to public health and maybe other parts of society as well. So one thing that I think is critical, and I think a lot of others would agree, is to somehow change the decision making and health programming structures to recognize the complexity of the challenges we face, or the complexity of conditions like endometriosis, or endometriosis connected with other comorbidities, for instance. But also to change these incentives and structures to recognize that women's health is connected to gender justice, which is connected to workforce participation, for instance, and that's connected to climate justice, and that's connected to adaptability, and so on. Right? These are all complex, long-running challenges, but our infrastructures and data and decision making are not oriented to addressing these challenges. You need to get these people in political power to contend with uncertainty or complexity, and I don't think we have the scientific methods or the processes to be able to handle that. And again, this goes back to sort of the continuous learning part. So how do you do continuous learning across for these political people in political power, but also how do you change that aspect of continuous learning to be able to deal with these challenges? So that's what I would do.